And this is Breaking Free. Today is Monday, and it's a beautiful day in August. And I want to say hello to Amnan.
Good
Yeah, I
afternoon.
did the same thing.
I know. Good
How-
afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm just fine. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I am here to say, because I know if you listened to me last week, you know that I was expecting my second grandchild, and Saturday at 2:38 in the morning, this precious little thing was delivered into our lives, and I mean just literally. I mean, my daughter went through some hard labor, and then all of a sudden, before the doctor even was in position, I mean, this baby did not want to come out, but when he made his mind up that he was ready to come out, he came right out. Yes, right out. I mean, nobody was even prepared. I mean, all of a sudden, doctor said, "Dara, stop pushing," and she wasn't even pushing. He just came out.
Yeah.
But he's beautiful. His name is Liev, Liev, Pierce Greenberg, and he's adorable, and I'm a very happy grandmother, and I'm in the clouds as usual, but I'm really in the clouds this time. I didn't know you can get into the clouds as high as I'm in. So I'm very excited. So it's a wonderful day in my home and in my life. So I want to share that with everyone. It's a blessing. And we have a lovely show. I don't know if I'm going to call it lovely, but I'm going to call it inspirational. And for many of you, it's going to bring up forgiveness. And I think that's huge. We talk a lot about mental illness in all forms of life, in all ways. It touches many of us, some of us more than others. Some of us have mental illness. Others of us have to live with people with mental illness. And, you know, illness is an interesting thing. It's not always something you see. You know, you see people in wheelchairs, you see people walking around with canes, you see people that have different issues. Mental illness is not something that you can see, and sometimes people don't even believe that it exists. So today my guest is a very interesting individual, I will say. He is a journalist. His name is Anish Mayumdar, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, Mayumdar. He's written his first fiction novel called The Isolation Door, and I'm going to hold it up for everybody to see. I had a really great conversation with him several months ago, and fascinating story. This is a story based on his personal life with living with a mother with schizophrenia, and he did not acknowledge this to anyone until he was about 25 years old. And this is a really interesting book, and I began reading it. And he is an excellent writer. I don't always say that, but he really is a writer, and he's been and graphic. So it's really interesting. And I want to read a quote that is in the beginning of his book. "You need not comfort me by lightening my load. I ask for strength to carry my burden." Tagore. And I asked Anish who Tagore was, and he's an Indian poet. And with that, I want to welcome Anish to our show. Anish, good morning, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. And congratulations on the grandchild. My wife and I, we recently welcomed our first child. It's going to be about a year now, our son, and my parents were over the moon. I'm telling you, I have never seen them happier than they were at that moment in the hospital, seeing sort of that next, generation sort of right there in front of their eyes. So congratulations. I know that's a really, really wonderful thing.
Yeah, it really is. And I had the pleasure of sitting with both my grandsons, and I'm going to probably cry, but in the hospital the other day, my oldest daughter brought her son, who's 2.5, my grandson Landon, and I was sitting on the bed with him and Liev, and
that's so nice.
Yeah, and it's such an innate thing. Like this little boy, you know, my grandson who's 2.5, we said to him, okay, very gently touch Liev, and he was very gently touching his like little cap on his head, and it was the sweetest thing. And
that's really awesome.
Yeah, so I'm verklempt.
Yes,
verklempt. How do you say it?
It's an auspicious time.
It
for
is.
Sure.
It really
Yeah.
is. And you know, like your parents, and I guess this is a great segue. I mean, you look at your children and you look at your children, you know you did your best.
Hmm.
You know you did your very, very best
Hmm.
with whatever you have. And then you look at your grandchildren and you say, you know what? I'm going to cry now. I'm going to do even better. I'm going to take that time like
Yeah.
last week. And I know we're going to get into this too, because of course the story is about you and your mom. And, my oldest daughter, when she'll say, Mom, can you babysit? Can you take care of Landon?
Hmm.
I do everything I can
Hmm.
to do that. And, when I was a mother, a new mother, I, of course, wanted to be with my children, but I had a furniture store. I worked. I
Hmm.
didn't always do those things. Now I will drop anything. And last week I took care of Landon for a while, and I took him swimming. And I was in the water with him, and he turned around to me, and he's 2.5. And he turned around to me, and he said, I'm having fun.
Oh,
And,
that is awesome. Those
yeah.
are things that you're never going to forget, I think.
No, no, no,
I think
no.
that they are, I mean, it really doesn't get much better than that,
No.
oh, that's really wonderful.
Yeah,
That's truly
yeah.
wonderred.
Yeah, and I think, I'd love to chat with you about that some more too, as far as your mother and your
Hmm.
parents in general, because you grew up toughly. You grew up
Toughly, yes,
toughly.
yes. I think that's accurate. Not without a lot of love, and I would say, even during the hardest times, with what we went through with my mom in particular, that love was always kind of unquestioning, and I could even see it, as my mom went through some of the worst things. Uh, and we saw her personality start to splinter and fracture. Even within that, there was always glimmers of the person that she is, the bond that she feels with me and my younger brother, and my dad as well. I think he felt for a long time that the things that we had experienced growing up with my mom, the really chaos that surrounded our lives, would really bleed over into my life and my brother's life, and it would sort of keep us from having meaningful lives of our own, lives with a measure of happiness. And I think it's for them. There's this sort of happy, dumbstruck look almost that sometimes comes over their faces when they don't think they're being watched, where they see me and my wife and my son and this whole life that it feels miraculous, and I try to remember that, and I try to stay grateful every day, because um, for a long time it didn't seem that I couldn't picture that. I could never have imagined a future along the lines of what came to be, and I know that it's a load off for them, and it allows them to sort of enjoy time with not just us, but my son in particular, with a kind of easement of the weight that they carried, the
So,
guilt that they carried.
let me ask you. So, I want you to talk about more details about your story. But one thing I do want to ask you, in going forward, you said you knew your mother loved you.
Hmm.
So, so when she was in a schizophrenic period of her life, how
Hmm.
did she show you? How did you know she loved you?
She, I can give you one really great example. So my mother, she really swayed towards the paranoid schizophrenic. So
She swayed
she
towards
would,
what? Say that one more time.
she really swayed more towards the paranoid schizophrenia side of things. So what happened was, as she began to sort of withdraw into herself, we would see over a period of a couple of months. She's naturally a very, very talkative, very vibrant woman who loves to, entertain and loves to show affection, and those things we would see that get stripped away almost on a daily basis. We'd see her pull into herself. We'd see her start to have these very disturbing conversations with voices in her head. We'd see her get into violent altercations sometimes with strangers on the street over perceived slights and things in her mind, that were telling her that these people were the enemy. And in fact, at the worst, we would see her attack my dad like that, blaming him of very elaborate conspiracies. And yet, through all of this, every once in a while, she would hesitantly knock on my bedroom door, and by that time I was trying to withdraw as much as I could away from this. Every once in a while, she'd knock on my door, and she'd give me like $5, or she'd give me this little piece of a snack that she ate, and she had just kind of weirdly wrapped and had saved it for me later. There were these small little signs that reminded me that it wasn't all the sickness in there. And to be fair, during the worst times of it, I sometimes wish that those signs hadn't been there, that I could totally dissociate myself and say, the mom that I love is gone, so why don't you just walk away from this and create a fresh start? I was never really able to do that, because no matter how bad things got, there were these just as troubling signs of who she really was, somewhere buried within all of that, within that mess that kind of embroiled us. So as she really spun out.
That's very, very interesting. So let's like just kind of isolate that for a second. So
Mm-hmm.
here's a young man who grows up who I guess was very sensitive to be able to notice those little acts of endearment from his mother, from your mother, during the times of those schizophrenic periods. She managed sometime to do something to show you that she loved you, and you felt it, and you knew. I did. Whether it was a little wink or a little something that let you know she knew you were around. And yet, at the same time, and this makes perfect sense, this is the duality of life. At the same time, you want to be pissed off at her.
Sure. Of course.
You don't want to know. You want to just be pissed off. This is not my mother. You want to have something to allow yourself to be angry with her.
Absolutely.
And she won't let you.
Absolutely. It's a weird kind of in-between zone sometimes between, if you lose someone suddenly and someone has an accident or whatever it is, as horrible as that is, there typically is some kind of a grieving process. And then whether it's hard, whether it's not as hard, you find ways to move on without that person. And what I always found to be really the most difficult thing about growing up with a parent with a mental illness like this was there was no stop. There was no period to grieve and say that this person is gone, because that person is still there. It took us several years to figure out that this wasn't something that was going to get magically cured one day, and that this was really a battle that we would all have to fight and always be vigilant for, always look out for those signs, always, sometimes have that uncomfortable moment where you have to ask, Mom, how are you doing? We're seeing some signs here. We're seeing some behavior. Maybe it's time we brought you in. That was difficult, but I think it's more honest in terms of the challenge. It's an enduring thing. It's something that everyone has to deal with, not just her.
So you had sort of this acknowledgement that was it preset that if you saw your mother kind of deviating from reality or whatever, that you saw her kind of going off, you had this thing where it was agreed upon by both of you, like a contract, that you would say something to her and she would acknowledge, or what?
Well, this is something that I would say my family is still working on. I would say it's really kind of taken root only in the last 8 years. Once the doctors had really found a combination of medication to kind of control her symptoms. I think before then, it just wouldn't have worked. But now, because there does seem to be a kind of healthier baseline that she has, a kind of stability that she didn't have before. Now, slowly, painfully, we're trying to kind of forge these healthy, open lines of communication through most of it. And she first got sick when I was 9 years old. So from then, right up until my age 25, when I started writing, what became The Isolation Door. During that period, it really wasn't that healthy. Our attitude, and I shared in this, and my dad as well, was we just felt that there was a sense of shame there, that not only was she wrong, but by extension, we were wrong too. And so when she was better and when she would come home, my parents really tried hard to go back to all the old routines, to host these elaborate Indian parties and invite all of their old friends, and show that they were the same, they were normal. And so that, in a weird way, made it harder because that pressure was so high that once we started seeing her slip, we didn't have the lines of communication in place to say, "Hey, Dad, have you been noticing this?" Or "Have you been seeing this? What should we do?" Instead, we would watch her sort of spiral out again, and not know what to do until it reached a point of crisis, and my dad had to, call in the doctors, call in the paramedics, and have her committed. So I would say it really took us a long time to start kind of breaking those old patterns and find a way to acknowledge it, and a lot of that is also her, I mean, it was hard for her to even admit up until a few years ago that she was even sick. She believed that she wasn't, that she didn't have a problem really up until just a couple of years ago.
So when you're growing up, I mean, who do you get to look at? I mean, who do you look at as a role model? Yeah, mentor, role model, clarification, support. Well, I mean, who do you look at beside? I mean, your father is not. I mean, anybody come through it? I mean, what happened?
My dad for sure. I think, even though the disagreements I would have with my dad over the approach in terms of how to handle my mom sometimes would be large, and there would be large arguments and things like that. The one thing that I always remembered, and when I actually got married to Erin in 2009, I said this in the speech that I gave to people there. The loyalty that he had, right or wrong, the fact that he never once considered just walking away from my mom and saying, "I can't handle this anymore." No matter how bad things got, the idea that he would cease to be our father and her husband, no matter what, that really made a strong impression on me, because that gave me an idea of what kind of a man he really was. And we could and still do argue over different points in terms of our respective families and how to handle mom, but that bedrock loyalty kind of served as a compass. Everything else, in terms of deciding to become a writer, I spent about 7 years as a screen actor working in Montreal and Toronto. All of those things were, my heroes were whatever I could find, quite frankly. I felt like I had a strong will. I felt that the direction part, and in terms of the people that I cared about, were heroes of, movie stars or authors, whoever would do it to me, whoever would give me that reassurance at the moment, would serve. So so I felt that aside from my dad, there really wasn't that much. It felt like a journey through a pretty black period, right. And I think really it's really just the sense of will and the maybe misguided sense that I wasn't gonna fall privy to this trap.
Well, sometimes something just, pardon me, pisses you off enough that you just say, no matter what, I'm not doing it. So
yes, that's exactly right.
I want to offer, for those of you that are listening, if you have any questions at all about, anything, please feel free. I mean, we're talking to Anish, but he's extremely sensitive. I mean, this is not just about him sharing his story for the heck of it. I mean, he's sharing his story to help free up, those of us that may be going through mental illness and are feeling guilty about our own families, and for those of us that are living with it because of somebody else. So please feel free to call 919-518-9773, or you can Skype in with us at computers, that's plural, the number 2K voice. You'll come in on voice, and Anish is on video, but we'd love to hear from you regardless, and if you have a question. So Suziani on our chat is asking about the stigma attached to having a family member with a mental illness and the fear that it might be hereditary. Was there a history of your mom's family of mental illness or schizophrenia?
Yeah, absolutely. She comes from a family that's originally from Calcutta, and she's one of 6 sisters, and pretty much she's a middle sister, and all of them have struggled with different forms of mental illness. There's an aunt who's struggled with some pretty severe depression. There's another aunt who has some pretty rough rage issues. They vary a lot depending on these sisters, and it affects them to various ways. My my mother, she didn't really show any signs up until the moment when she lost her father, my grandfather. That seemed to trigger something in her, and we saw, these personalities changes take place. So you're right. I mean, I probably, looking back on it, we should have looked back and said, Mom is absolutely at risk for something like this. But we didn't do it. We didn't do it until the bottom kind of fell out with her psychologically, and then we were kind of playing catch up and trying to put the pieces back together after the fact. So, yeah, there's definitely.
So there is. So do you fear for yourself?
I did in my 20s in particular. That was a pretty unstable time for me. I was living alone as an actor, and I had this kind of really misguided, honestly, philosophy of not letting people get too close to me, not sharing who I really was, kind of inventing on the fly who I was, certainly who my past was and who my parents were. I didn't want that, again, that stigma really to taint a budding relationship, a budding friendship. And so I was very alone, and I would frequently cut ties with people who really cared about me preemptively before they really found that out. And at that period, absolutely, I did. I spent between 2004 and 2006 in Montreal, living a really hermit-like existence. Didn't have much in the way of friends. I had this book that I started working on, and that started to feel more and more like a lifeline, or at least a new career and a fresh start. And during that period, looking back on it, I was pretty seriously depressed for about 3 years. And then the journey to get the book published and moving to New York City and stuff, that really shook me out of that. And and thank God, it's never stopped. That break really does seem to have been permanent. Looking back on it now, from the purview of about 8 years.
Mm-hmm. So when I guess this is something when you are disconnecting from the world, you don't want people to find out who you are. When you say who you are, you're referring to that your mother has schizophrenia, or that you have mental illness in your family, or that you could be a candidate for being mentally ill. What is that you hold back from?
I think I really do think it's a combination of all of those. The one that I feel the strongest, as the driver back in those days, was just being identified as the son of someone who I felt at the time was broken, and feeling that people would look at me as broken in some way. We lived such a crazy life growing up, and there was a lot of hiding, and there was a lot of guilt and shame, mixed up in that. And I felt that if, as an adult, I started talking about that and sharing that people would look at me differently. They would pity me, or they would, they certainly wouldn't look at me as a normal person, whatever that meant, and I felt that I, when I was a kid and through high school, I didn't have a choice in a lot of that. My mom would show up for a play I was doing, or she would show up for an event or a soccer game I was playing, and everyone would see, everyone would know. You could tell that something was wrong with her. And I felt that as an adult, I wanted to give myself the option to have a clean slate, to not have that kind of casted shadow over me as it had done for a really long time.
I'm just picturing your mother coming into, your school, just kind of, and this might just be a stereotype, but I picture her walking in kind of, in those schizophrenia periods, kind of like looking lost, maybe mixed match clothing, and just not looking like she knows where she is, and yet kind of, out there. Is that?
I think that's pretty fair to say. I was in about grade 4 when she really started spiraling out for the first time. And my clearest memories of that were twofold. One was every morning I would ask her for lunch, to pack me a lunch, and she would insist that she's not packing me anything. She's going to show up to hand deliver the lunch herself. And half the time she just wouldn't show up, and I got to know the monitors and my principal really well, because she would arrange to ask someone, to kind of inquire about the other students if someone had half a sandwich or a cup of soup to eat. And I didn't know why she would do that. And by the same token, she didn't trust me to go on the bus. She felt that the school bus was tied in with some kind of conspiracy that she had. She insisted on picking me up. And the same deal. I remember, twiddling my finger through the fence for at least an hour every day, long after everyone had left, waiting for her to remember to pick me up. These things that sort of immediately kind of mark you as what's going on, what's wrong there. I've recently had a chance to talk with people from that time, and it really surprised me to hear that a lot of them, they didn't feel what I thought that they would feel. What they felt when they thought of it was really, they were concerned about me, and they were concerned about my mom. And yet, for some reason, growing up in it, what I felt was the shame much more acutely than the fact that there might be other people who could, understand and could be a source of support.
I have a lot of questions. So, and then there's questions on the chat. But as an Indian, being Indian, does that come with more shame, more hiding, more shame, more anything? I don't know if you could do more, but I'm just curious.
I felt, I felt like it definitely added an extra dimension to it. Since the book came out, the Indian families that I knew and I know in Montreal, they've been some of the biggest supporters of the book, and they've really championed it and really made sure that it's getting in the hands of people, particularly those with similar backgrounds. When I was growing up, we felt a tremendous amount of pressure. I'm sure that this is true for a lot of different ethnicities who, immigrate to the West or a foreign country. My dad would always hammer it in, to me and my brother that we were Indian. We were born there, but we come from a different place, and we would have to work harder, and we would have to be perfect in everything that we do to make the same kind of gains as someone who was kind of to the manner born. And when she started to get sick, I think that the immediate reaction was, oh my gosh, don't let people know. Don't let them know that this is messed up. Hide it as much as you can. Pretend as much as you can. And even my mom would willingly go into this kind of charade when she was sick and she needed really rest and relaxation. A lot of times this social pressure to show that they were still this Indian couple that was well-to-do and their children were successful and everything was great, no need to worry, that really overwhelmed her, and that added a level of stress that shouldn't have been there. Some of the people that they grew up with, families that immigrated around the same time that they did from India to Canada, when she really started to get sick and get violent, they cut ties. I don't blame them for that at all. She could be really disturbing to be around. And yet, there were other families that showed up at every court proceeding, that cooked us meals when we weren't in a shape to even think about food, that became kind of like family to me. And so it really is it's a like you said, that duality is certainly there in the Indian culture that I experienced, where at one part there's much more pressure to succeed and to show that you're perfect, but at the same time, when things do start to fall apart, you see a level of loyalty sometimes in people that humbles me and brought me to tears, during some of the hardest periods.
Yeah, you don't think about it.
No, you really don't.
I have lots of questions based on what you just said, but I do want to address something that Suziani is bringing up about allergies, and that she has done some research and came up with the fact that they've recognized that if you are gluten intolerant or celiac, that and it goes undiagnosed, it could lead to mental illness. It could lead to schizophrenia. Do you know anything about that?
No, I haven't looked into it. I think schizophrenia in general is kind of a mystery. I know that I remember reading very recently about how there seems to be a bit of a movement in some circles to look into declassifying it simply because there's such a wide range of symptoms.
Declassifying it and classifying it as what?
Well, breaking it, not calling it schizophrenia at all. To say that there's probably multiple mental illnesses that are being lumped in together here under the umbrella term of schizophrenia. And I think there may be some truth to that. If you look at if you bring together in a room several people suffering from schizophrenia, I think it would be shocking to see how disparate the symptoms can be between person to person. There's oftentimes very little consistency in terms of what treatments a person responds to. Can really be a question of trial and error. I think my mom probably dealt with a lot more of the error than the good stuff for almost 20 years. She's had a variety of doctors. She's got a great one now, but we've also seen the flip side of that, and so. In terms of where we go from there, I think certainly having that awareness of having people sharing their stories is definitely a great first step in terms of just breaking down that wall that comes with it. I think you mentioned it earlier in the interview about how one of the insidious things about mental illness is that oftentimes it's invisible. You don't see a broken arm or an injured body part. You see these psychological effects, and I think that can really scare people. And I think the first step, take away the medical side of it. I think the first step is doing what we can to bring the experiences of people who've been dealing with this into the fold of society instead of treating it like something that doesn't exist or a private matter. I really do believe that needs to happen.
Yeah, I know, I'm Jewish, and I know that in a lot of things that go on, and this, again, could be a stereotypical, I don't know, but I do know that, we'll take care of it. Don't worry. Don't let it, we'll handle it ourselves. There's no reason to tell anybody, let's just keep it between us. We'll take care of it ourselves. And I think that sounds to me a little bit like what would have gone on in your house and in a lot of homes.
Absolutely.
We don't want to share it, but that's the point. Several years ago, I think, we had Dr. Ellen Sachs on our show. Do you know who she is?
I think I saw a TED Talk with her a little while ago.
Exactly. And we had her on the show, and she is an attorney. She's a professor. She did a TED Talk about having schizophrenia and what it was like when she wasn't on her meds. She's married. When she's on her meds, I mean, she can certainly tell the difference, and she is speaking out. And when she came and she spoke, it was, because what you don't know, you're scared of, obviously. Like you were talking earlier about, what people would say about you. It's kind of like, you don't want to catch it, and if it's catchable, of course. If your mother had it, you must have it. Then I don't want to be in that, right. And not always the case. But when she came on, it was so freeing because it allowed me, and I hope our audience, to understand what she went through and what the possibilities are for other people who are going through it. And she was able to verbalize. She was able to communicate from both sides, from her eyewitness to being in a schizophrenic period to being not necessarily, but still being schizophrenic. And it was amazing to hear the explanation. And then, of course, for you to be coming out and speaking for, you love your mother.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, Chris is asking, were you angry? Are you angry?
I think the anger has definitely started to dissipate over the last couple of years. Mostly ever since I met my wife, Erin, who I met her in 2006 in New York City when I was trying to find a literary agent to start this process of getting the book out there. And she's really been, my rock ever since then. She's that voice in my ear who tells me, hey, why don't you let that go? Why don't you leave that in the past, or why don't you?
And does she have any mental illness in her family?
No, not at all. She comes from a pretty big, Irish German family in Rochester, New York, where we live now. And no, she didn't have any experience with that. And yet she has this kind of openness to her, this kind of feeling of safety with her. That on our first date, I remember she was really the first person that I told any of this to, and I found myself in this Greek restaurant in Astoria. Having this 4-hour conversation with this girl that I barely knew about all of this, and amazingly enough, she didn't go running away, and in fact, it kind of bound us together as partners, and I really do feel that once I met her, I truly had someone else in my life who spoke the strange alien language, I guess, that I had feared no one else would really ever know. And since then, being able to start a family with her, being able to kind of witness the daily miracle of things like waking up and seeing my wife and my son, next to me, they're sleeping, just all of that healed me in some way. And all of a sudden, the anger started to really fade away, and it started to be more about how can I be a good son to them again, which I had been before. I felt in some ways I always was, but I wanted to play a bigger role in my mother's life, and I wanted to let her know that she's loved and that she's supported regardless.
So when you had that period of time where you might think you were not a good son, mm-hmm. you were being a niche, is what I would think.
Yeah, I think I don't think you could have had where my life is now without that period. I think there needed to be some kind of a break there, during my early to mid 20s, I would say contact with my parents was pretty minimal. I stayed pretty close with my brother, but it was pretty minimal, and that really only changed once. Once I was in the States, and really, I mean, I'd finished this early version of the book in 2006, and I left my entire life in Canada behind. I think it's kind of a testament to where I was at in my headspace, that I was perfectly happy walking away and feeling I need to create a life on my own terms. And once that happened, things did change.
Full circle. So, quick question: were you ever fearful of having a child?
I had a couple of thoughts. I think this is a quality that maybe I share with a lot of authors, that I can tuck things away into a little denial box or a look at later box for a long period of time while I'm working on something else. And when Erin became pregnant, we talked about it a little bit, that there is this chance that he's going to be more susceptible to this. I felt that worst case scenario, if that was something he deals with when he gets older, up until that point and for every day after that, I want to show him that he is truly loved. I want to be the best father I can to him, and maybe we'll deal with the hard turns in life when it comes. But I felt that it was wrong to not do it.
To deprive yourself, just in case. I want to ask you, do you think, as a person having gone through this and who is creative, mm-hmm. quite sensitive, I think you have a connection to something deeper, because you're a survivor as well. Do you think that with the information that you've been able to drum up, with the mm-hmm. with the research you've done, mm-hmm. with the progression in medical care, do you think that with your son, for instance, let's just hypothetically say, mm-hmm. He is showing signs, do you think you can change the baseline? Do you think you could change the outcome based on I don't want to say that your family didn't love your mother, but mm-hmm. I think that your knowledge and the love grows in a way that maybe handling it differently with more information could make the outcome different for your son or for anybody?
I do. I do. I definitely think that if we saw these types of symptoms affect my son, that we've learned from our past mistakes, that for sure we wouldn't take the initial step that my family took, which was to hide away, because I really think that really exacerbated things. And it kept this period of her relapsing and getting slowly rehabilitated and relapsing eventually again. I think she could have reached a point of stability much faster without
Why
that.
do you
without
think that
group.
way? Why do you think not hiding would have changed things?
Because her natural inclinations as she started to get sick were these paranoid delusions and these conspiracies. And I think once she saw that we were, in a sense, kind of aiding that, because we were starting to keep secrets now, and we were starting to engage in kind of deflective behavior from other people, and we were starting to pretend that we were something we were not. How could that do anything but in a way spur her on? You know, if at the beginning we had taken a different approach, a conscious, open approach, an approach that had a mentality of, we're going to bring this stuff into the open. We're going to treat this as an open family issue that is shared by all of us to some degree, and we're not going to allow you to hide this and kind of co-opt us as kind of co-conspirators in this. That, I think, would have had a tremendous effect on my mother's kind of journey. I'm not saying that the bad things wouldn't have happened, but I think she could have, we could have brought her to a place of greater stability faster with that kind of an approach, rather than the way that we went to.
Right.
So I would hope that we would think more along those lines, and right from the get-go, get those communication patterns, in place.
Mm-hmm. Not enable, so to speak.
Absolutely.
So where does spirituality play a role in your life and mental illness in communicating with your mother or what would you say? I mean, is there a role? I mean, I think I have a very dear friend who's bipolar, mm-hmm. and she found Reiki, she found meditation, she found these things that mm-hmm. helped, kind of became a lifeline mm-hmm. to love, to a sense of reality that was beyond the mental illness, that mm-hmm. took her out of the darkness. Mm-hmm. What's your feeling about this?
I think this is like a great question, and talking kind of in a bit of an off the cuff way about it. I will say, and I think this ties in a little bit to your question about what role models I had or what feeling I had. Pretty much through my entire life, especially as things really got bad, I had this feeling. I didn't know if it was right, whether it was wrong. I felt that there was some presence out there, that was looking out for me. My parents were never particularly religious. They are Hindu, but it's the kind of Hindu where you go to the temple once a year, if that. They weren't really devout in any way, shape, or form. So it's not like we grew up with a strong sense of spirituality. And yet I had this feeling when I was 19 years old. I got into a pretty severe car accident. I fell asleep at the wheel, and the car flipped over, and I woke up as the car was flipping over, and I was sort of dragged upside down for a long period of time. And the car came to a stop, and the windows were blown out, and I managed to unbuckle my belt and sort of crawl out through one of the windows. And I remember looking back at this, broken husk of a car, crumpled, and I remember looking at myself, and I had a couple of minor scrapes on my fingers, and that was the moment where I started feeling that maybe there was something out there that was going to keep me safe, and maybe he was doing that because I was meant to do something. Maybe there was some purpose that I was meant to fulfill, and that idea was a kind of secret compass that steered me through the worst of it, because I felt that I was special. I felt that there was someone looking out for me, that there was a God, or there was something there that was saying, Anish, you're going to have hard times, but this is for a reason. There's something I'm trying to show you, and there's steps that you need to take to become the person that you need to be. And that feeling has never really left me. And in many ways, it's helped to remind me of the blessings that I have.
So what about your mother? Do you think, I mean, and I hear what you're saying, and I think that's very important. You got a message, and you listened, and you listened, and I think that's very important for anybody who's watching today. You know, this is a message. This show's a message to send the archive to the show, the link to the show, to friends of yours, people you know, because we're all about breaking free. This show is about hope, period. You know, if I had a tagline, I'd say it's about hope. So I don't have a tagline, but if I did, that'd be it. Do you think that for people with mental illness, there is a chance, like I talked about my friend, is there a chance that with a deeper connection, an opening to spirituality, that even for somebody with mental illness, the baseline can shift?
I think I think it can do nothing but help, truly, and I think a big part of that is the sense of personal belief and personal self-worth and the responsibility that comes with that. And I think the other part, you know, my wife's Catholic, and you know, her mother is pretty devout, and the big thing I see when I go with them to mass or you know another celebration is I see that it's not just about the personal belief of the person, but you have a whole support network of people who have a shared sense of belief and are willing and oftentimes able to extend that hand. So I think it's that communal aspect that comes from a background in faith or a sense of faith that can help almost as much as what it does for the individual, and whether or not it helps them to maintain their sense of equilibrium.
You know, it's interesting. There's something you said a little bit ago, and I had a thought. Now I can't get it, but what you would think would be a help, and what you think would be something that would support somebody with mental illness, you think at the same time could push them deeper back. So you think, coming into a community, feeling the connection, feeling the love, feeling the support, could also be overwhelming because of in your mother's case, the paranoia. You know, having more people around to love and support you could also lead to more people wanting something from her, more people to worry about, more people to want to get away from. Sure. So, but you think that when you're talking to a soul, you know, is the soul, I mean, we're talking mental illness. What are we talking about with the soul? Where is the soul in mental illness?
That is something that I think, you know, everyone who goes through it is, you know, and I really think you've hit on the root conflict that's there, or the root struggle that's there, because you're right. You know, at times when you see someone spiral out and almost seem to become a different person, you feel, has the soul left the body? I never truly believed that. I always felt that she's there. I think the hardest part has been as me, my dad, my mom, and my brother, as we've all kind of gone through our respective journeys in life and are getting older and are seeing things, I think the hardest thing is to realize that she'll never come all the way back. You know, she's never going to get every piece that you remember back and become who she was. The illness has taken things from her. And yet, for all of that, what remains is true, and what remains is her, and what remains is, you know, her heart. My mom was, I think, in the lives of most children, my entire life. You know, she was the sun and the moon. You know, she looked after me every single day. My dad was always at work, and she was my lifeline, and she hasn't left. she's still there. And I think that this disease can sometimes cause the illusion of thinking that they're not there, but I think that would be the disease. You know, I've never come across a person with a mental illness where I felt that they're just a shell. They're there somewhere, you know, and it needs to be, you know, I think we need to know that and have the faith that it's there, regardless
And not
of how
to
bad they go.
speak to, I mean, what I'm hearing you sometimes say, I think, is not to just speak to the mental illness. I mean, it's no different than when somebody's lying in bed with a coma.
Yep.
You still talk, you play music, you share stories, and I know that there's been accounts where they remember what's been said. So, you know, so you don't want to speak to the mental illness per se. You want to speak to what you know. I mean, like when you see your mother loving on your son, I mean, that is true.
That is true.
Pure love.
Yep.
You know, what could your son at a year old do to hurt your mother? If anything brings out the wellness in your mother, it's going to be that.
I think it had a kind of a positive shock effect on her. You know, when she was at the hospital when he was born, and she was in the waiting room, and I went over to her, and I'd taken the first couple of shots on my camera of Mickey, our son, and I start showing it to her. And, you know, her face is usually, you know, very non-expressive. She has trouble expressing emotion. And as she's scrolling through these pictures, you could see the lights start to turn on somewhere there. And halfway through, this huge kind of kid-like smile breaks out across her face. And she looks up at me and she goes, "My God, you're a dad." You know, like she realized it for the first time. Like it was really sinking in. And in the beginning, I felt that it was never going to get to a point where we'd feel comfortable enough with having my mom look after Mickey by herself. And yet she keeps exceeding what we think she's going to do. And it's all because she loves him. It's all because she wants to be a good grandmother. She wants Mickey to grow up knowing her and loving her. And she knows that part and parcel with that means taking care of herself to the best way that she can. And you know, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, knowing how to change his diaper, knowing how to feed him, knowing how to, you know, warm up the breast milk, knowing how to do all of those things. That's something that I honestly don't remember the last time I've seen her take that kind of, you know, proactive step towards engaging with us. It's always been sort of kind of having to coax her out of her shell. So that's been, you know, nothing short of miraculous to see that change in her.
So this is, you know, I mean, we can talk about a lot of things. I wanted to ask you the worst thing your mother ever did. I wanted to ask you how your brother was. I had all these other questions that, you know, that I've been writing down as you've been talking, but I think the most important thing for people to get here is not what the worst thing was that his mother did or how bad she might have gotten. It's how good she can be around his son. That, to me, is like, is the hope. That's what you pray for. That's the message, you know, that I think an issue, you know, and the fact that you were blessed with a sensitivity to be able to share this with the world, you know, to be able to share beyond the anger, you know, be able to share your emotion, your, the truth. You know?
She used to be an English teacher. My mom, an elementary school English teacher, back in India before she moved to Canada with my dad. That career track was something that when she got sick, she could never really marshal the resources or the attention to do that again. But she always had an enduring love of books. She would give me impromptu English lessons when I was a kid, and I don't think it's an accident that. I write for a living. I think we're always kind of reaching out to the people that we love, regardless of the past, in one way or the other. And I feel in some ways maybe I can be a bit of a voice that she once could have been or once could have had. She might not always be able to speak the way that she would want to today, but I can speak. And
you can speak for her too.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I think
so.
You're sensitive enough to be able to listen to her actions, to her nonverbal, and to be able to express that. I think that's really that's gifted.
Well, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I want you to tell everybody about your book. It's really good, and it's well written, and it's really a great story. So share it and where they can find your book. What else they'll find.
The book is called The Isolation Door. It's the story of a 23-year-old named Neil Kapoor, a man not unlike myself, and his journey really to find a life for himself beyond the shadow of his mother's schizophrenia. During the course of the book, he attends theater school, and he falls in love for the first time and develops some really meaningful friendships. And yet at the same time, his mother has been committed to a mental hospital, is going through a very disturbing rehabilitation process. And he's trying simultaneously to be a good son to her, to hold a family together, while at the same time trying to find a life for himself, trying to find a sense of happiness that is almost like a ghost that he's never experienced, but he wants to so desperately experience that. And, writing that book was sort of helped me find the light at the end of the tunnel and helped me find a sense of hope. And my hope is that this book, The Isolation Door, which is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and pretty much all the other major booksellers, my hope is that others who read it, whether you have personal experience with this or not, hopefully it'll speak to you. That human journey will speak to you and resonate.
Yeah, that was beautiful. And I think what I find so interesting in closing is how we talked some about hiding and how Anish chose early on to write this book as a fiction novel, but it so depicts his life that there isn't but so much hiding you can do, and he's not hiding anymore. I mean, this man is out there. His mother is out there. I mean, he's not doing this without his mother's permission, without his family's permission. So it shows how you've evolved as well, which I think is part of the story, I
think that's true.
Don't you think? Everybody
I do.
Right? So thank you for sharing your evolving with us.
Thank you. I mean, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. I feel like the time has gone by like nothing, and I think I feel like I could talk to you all day. So I truly appreciate it, Marilyn.
Likewise, and I would love to follow your career, and I'd love you to come back again. I think that's all part of this evolving story.
Oh, thank you. I'd love that.
Yeah, because we don't want to forget. We do want to forget some things, but we don't want to forget where life can go when you give it a chance,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we want to, not just talk about your mom, even though we send her our love, and if she is listening, I want to thank you for allowing this to be your whole family. Thank you for everybody that's listening out there that's part of Anish's family. Thank you for allowing this to happen, because we need this, I mean, we need people to be honest and regular everyday people. So in closing, honey, what would you like to add, Anish?
The only thing I'd like to say is, and I think you really hit on it, is, to those people listening out there, let love be your guiding, compass, take that turn away from the dark and find your love, your happiness, because it's like you said, you never know what is around the corner, and you never know the delights and that life can have in store if you take that first faithful step out there and see what's out there for you.
Absolutely. And I think Chris wrote that this was this is a love story, and Suziani said, "What a pleasure meeting this young man." And she said to me, "Marilyn, one of your best and one of your most important shows."
Oh, that's wonderful.
So thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, and for everybody out there, take this show to heart. Share it with people you know. Some of the questions that I got to ask him today, they weren't planned. People always ask me, what are the questions you're going to ask? And I always say, I don't know. I'm just going to let them come. And today's questions that came to me, especially the ones towards the end, were questions that just came, that I felt really comfortable with, and they came from above, so I guess they were supposed to be asked. And so I want to thank you once again for sharing with us today, and everybody out there, thank you for being here and supporting us with your energy, because it's because of your being out there and knowing how important this is that this is so. So break free today. Mwah.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, The Tanya Love Show, and if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals. That VidBlasterGuy.com, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.